business.
This is Vashon Flowers, standing trial in Muskegon Heights, Michigan, charged with first-degree murder for the killing of his wife, Jamie Thomas Flowers. It all began on a quiet Sunday morning. What started as a simple argument over a pack of cigarettes turned deadly. Jamie was furious that her husband had slipped back into old habits, and after a heated exchange, Vashon stormed out of the house. Hours later, he returned, this time kicking in the door. He approached his wife and fired 4 shots into her chest. Jamie collapsed on the floor of her home, while Vashon fled, only to later surrender to police.
Prosecutors say Jamie Thomas Flowers was shot multiple times by her husband, Vashon Flowers, and one of those shots was at close range. And it happened while the victim's daughter and grandson hid in a bedroom inside the Muskegon Heights home.
In court, prosecutors painted him as a volatile man with a history of violence. Because of multiple prior felony convictions, he was charged as a habitual offender and denied bail at arraignment.
The victim in this case had been shot multiple times by Mr. Flowers. At least one of those appears to be a point-blank, close contact injury.
But the most explosive moment came during the victim impact statements. As Jamie's young daughter took the stand, her brother, London Thomas, could no longer contain himself. With fury in his eyes, London launched himself over the podium, lunging at the man who had murdered his mother. The courtroom descended into chaos. Deputies rushed in, tackling him before he could reach Flowers, as gasps and shouts echoed through the gallery. When order was finally restored, the court moved forward. Justice had the last word. Vashon Flowers was sentenced to life in prison for the murder of Jamie Thomas Flowers. Vashon Flowers was attacked by the victim's son, but how does that compare to a brawl where 2 brothers leap across the courtroom to attack their mom's murderer? This is Dale Williams, standing in an Ohio courtroom, charged with the brutal murder of his ex-girlfriend, Elizabeth Pledger Stewart. In June 2017, Elizabeth was driving through Newcomerstown when Dale spotted her on the road. He followed closely, accelerating, and then deliberately ran her off the road. Her vehicle crashed, leaving her trapped inside. And that's when Dale walked up, raised his gun, and fired multiple shots into her body, killing her in cold blood.
Prosecutors tell me Williams was meticulous in his planning, to the point of choosing the spot where he sat in his van waiting for the victim to drive by on her way to work, even what he wore that day and how he thought it would all end.
The murder unfolded in broad daylight, witnessed by horrified bystanders.
In fact, a lot of people who were driving down to the courthouse to start work that day had seen some of it.
Police rushed to the scene and arrested Dale without resistance. In court, he pleaded guilty, recounting his version of the events, but his admission brought no comfort to the grieving family.
He went in detail about how he lied in wait, and he made a statement initially that he was trying to save 1 bullet for himself as well, or 1 bullet to point at the police, but he ended up using it all.
When the sentencing hearing began, the air inside the courtroom was suffocating, grief colliding with rage. And then it broke. As Elizabeth's daughter prepared to give her victim impact statement, 2 of her sons, Jerome Stewart and Anthony Dees, lunged toward Dale. The brothers launched forward, chairs scraping, voices erupting, their raw fury spilling into the room as they tried to reach their mother's killer. Deputies surged in, wrestling to restrain them, but chaos had already consumed the courtroom. In a desperate attempt to regain control, officers deployed tasers in the middle of the proceedings. The hearing was halted instantly. Dale Williams was removed under heavy guard, shielded from the storm of rage surrounding him. When court finally reconvened, Elizabeth's aunt stepped forward, her words cutting through the tension, speaking directly to the man who stole her niece's life.
When we saw him, his face, we felt it was so much emotion due to a flashback of how he just killed my niece.
And then came the final word. Dale Williams was sentenced to 23 years to life in prison. Outside the courtroom, a family friend expressed relief at the judgment.
She did a really good job in the courtroom and making sure that he will never see the light of day again. And so we just...
But the day's consequences reached further. Jerome Stewart and Anthony Dees, the sons who had launched at their mother's killer, were themselves sentenced 30 days in jail for assault and disruption of court proceedings.
Anthony Dees and Jerome Stewart will now be in court on Monday. Right now, they're in the Mahoning County Jail facing assault and contempt of court charges.
Dale Williams' courtroom moment turned into a family free-for-all, but Taylor Schabusiness took courtroom fights to another level by attacking her own lawyer mid-hearing.
Frustration that may be a moot point.
All right.
It is one of these, Your Honor.
Right. This is Taylor Schabusiness, a 25-year-old convicted killer, and she is in court facing charges for one of the most gruesome murders in Wisconsin's history. On February 23, 2022, Taylor murdered her boyfriend, 24-year-old Shad Therian, during what began as a drug-fueled sexual encounter. Both had taken meth, but what started as intimacy quickly turned into horror. Taylor strangled Shad with a chain, decapitated his body, sexually assaulted his corpse, and then used a bread knife to dismember him. Hours later, when Shad's mother came home, she walked into a nightmare. In the basement, she found her son's severed head inside a bucket. She immediately called 911.
Pretty positive my son's head is in a bucket inside a bucket in my basement.
What makes you think that?
Because I looked in the bucket.
And what did you see?
Exactly what I told you.
Police officers rushed to the scene and discovered blood smeared outside the home, bloody footprints leading into the basement, and Shad's body parts scattered in plastic totes, bags, and boxes. His head, however, remained in that bucket, right where his mother had found it. Taylor was arrested without resistance.
Make sure you got nothing on you here. With Taylor. Contact Taylor, you have one more for your wrists.
And during interrogation, she confessed in chilling detail.
Like we were smoking the right? And then I'm terrible at explaining things, so let's see here. And then here comes the chain, right? And then he put it around his neck.
She admitted to s***ing Shad while high on meth, admitted to dismembering his body, and admitted to moving his remains between her van and the basement.
I drained his head. Well, like, after I smothered his blood, I put it in the bucket, but then there's still blood in this bucket because it's coming out of the head. Should have took the brains and all, but I didn't do that. And then
But the gruesome confessions weren't the only shocking part of this case, because when Taylor entered the courtroom, she stunned everyone again, this time by going after her own attorney.
Stop.
Deputies jumped in, wrestling her back under control as her attorney scrambled to safety.
Stop it. Rachel, call.
From then on, Taylor was only allowed in court under heavy guard, shackled, with a spit hood, and deputies monitoring her every move. In July 2023, the jury convicted her of first-degree intentional homicide, mutilation of a corpse, and third-degree sexual assault.
The first verdict reads as follows. We, the jury, find the defendant, Taylor Denise Schabusiness, guilty of first-degree intentional homicide as charged in count 1 of the information, dated this date, July 26th, 2023.
She was sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole.
First-degree intentional homicide as a repeater. It's a Class A felony. Going to impose life imprisonment without the possibility of extended supervision. I believe that's appropriate in light of the...
But that was not the end of her violence. While serving her sentence, Taylor attacked a prison nurse with a metal tray, bringing her back to court yet again. And once more, she went for her attorney.
But that may be a moot point.
All right.
It is one witness, Your Honor.
Deputies, this time prepared, immediately swarmed and restrained her before she could land a blow.
Drop the record.
Since her first conviction, 4 public defenders have abandoned her case. Each one learned the same lesson. The price of representing Taylor Schabusiness was a risky business, which could cause grievous bodily harm. Taylor attacked her attorney, but what happens when it's the high judge himself who steps off the bench to throw punches? This is a circuit court in Brevard County, Florida, where Judge John Murphy is presiding over a routine docket at the Moore Justice Center. Across from him stands public defender Andrew Weinstock, representing a client facing charges of assault and resisting arrest. On the surface, it is an ordinary day in court, but what begins as routine will soon turn into one of the most shocking and unforgettable judicial moments ever captured on a courtroom microphone. The conflict starts with something seemingly minor. Judge Murphy, trying to move through his long docket, pushes for the defendant to waive his right to a speedy trial.
Public defender, what do you want to do?
But they filed.
They have.
I'm not waiving.
All right, what do you want to do?
It's a common request meant to ease pressure on the court's calendar, but Andrew Weinstock refuses. He insists on preserving his client's rights, exactly what any defense attorney is obligated to do.
I'm not waiving. If you want to set it for trial, set it for trial.
The tension thickens in the air.
If I had a rock, I would throw it at you right now.
You know,
stop pissing me off. Just sit down.
But the attorney stands his ground still.
I don't need your help.
No, you know what? I'm the public defender. I have a right to be here, and I have a right to stand and represent my clients.
Then it happens. Judge Murphy utters words no one expects to hear from a sitting judge in a courtroom.
If you want to fight, let's go out back and I'll just beat your ass.
He challenges Weinstock to step outside and settle the matter physically. The room falls into stunned silence. Moments later, Murphy rises from the bench and exits through a side door. Weinstock follows, and the 2 men disappear from view. And almost instantly, the sound of a scuffle erupts from the hallway. Seconds later, Judge Murphy re-enters the room alone, straightening his robe as if nothing happened.
Thank you.
I will catch my breath eventually. Man, I'm an old man.
He resumes handling cases, continuing the docket without defense counsel present for the remaining defendants. Andrew Weinstock does not return.
Your choices, considering there's probably going to be a changeover in personnel, are setting it for trial June 9th, or if you were wanting to waive speedy, we would set it for July 15th.
I would like to get it done as fast as possible.
That doesn't help me.
But the incident cannot be ignored. News of the altercation spreads quickly through the legal community and into national headlines. The Florida Judicial Qualifications Commission launches a full-scale investigation, examining not only the physical fight but also Murphy's decision to proceed with cases in the absence of counsel. The case escalates to the Florida Supreme Court. There, in a unanimous ruling, the justices conclude that Judge John Murphy's conduct is incompatible with the dignity and impartiality expected from the bench. The court orders him permanently removed from judicial office. As for Andrew Weinstock, the public defender who stood up to the judge that day, his path takes its own turn. He eventually resigns from the public defender's office. John Murphy might have launched an attack against the public defender in his own court. But how does that compare to a case where the attack is instead from the defendant straight at the judge? This is Deobra Redden, and he is in court in Las Vegas, Nevada, facing charges of attempted battery. The trial was completely over. The verdict was already in, and Deobra Redden has been found guilty of all the charges leveled against him. What remained in the courtroom now was the sentencing, the final word that would decide whether Deobra walked out on probation or if he would spend a number of time behind bars.
I shouldn't be sent to prison for a second time.
Have you looked at your criminal history? Have you looked at your criminal history?
Redden pleads desperately with the court. He insists he's a changed man, that prison isn't the answer, and that probation would give him a chance to rebuild his life. But Judge Mary Kay Holthus isn't swayed.
Place in my mind, my mental health, I have a support system. I just got hired as a teamster for, a union.
She's seen his criminal record, she's weighed his past choices, and she thinks it was time to mete out a harsher sentence.
Shape that, but I think it's time that he gets a taste of something else because I just can't with that history.
Then, in an instant, everything changes.
Get him out of this courtroom.
As Judge Holthus prepares to deliver her sentence, Redden suddenly launches himself over the defense table and charges at the bench. And the judge, who did not see the attack coming, could barely move out of the way before he landed on her. Officers fight to pull Redden off, wrestling him to the ground while others shield the bench. The tension doesn't break until he's pinned, cuffed, and dragged out of the room. Judge Holthus, visibly shaken, is helped back to her feet. The courtroom is left stunned, the reality of the assault weighing heavily on everyone who just witnessed a line few defendants ever dared to cross. A week later, Redden returns to court, this time under the watch of overwhelming security. Shackled, surrounded by deputies, he faces the same judge he attacked.
Mr. Almasi's here now.
Good morning.
Judge Holthus makes it clear that her decision was made before the assault, and it remains unchanged.
In accordance with the laws of the state of Nevada, this court does now sentence you in addition to the $25 administrative assessment fee, $150 DNA fee, the $3 DNA administrative assessment fee, and $250 indigent defense fee, 19 to 48 months in the Nevada Department of Corrections. How much better for time served does he have?
Deobra's outburst shocked the court, but Jacob Larson's fight went further. His meltdown in the courtroom pushed the judge to rip off his robe and join the brawl.
That's enough for you, all right? I will make it 93.
This is Jacob Larson, and he is in court in Jackson County, Michigan, appearing for a protection order hearing. Larson had been accused of stalking a woman, showing up at her workplace, dropping off flowers, and even posting a video online where he boldly claimed they were in a relationship. But in reality, the woman had made it clear she wanted nothing to do with him, and now Larson was standing before a judge to answer for his behavior. By this point, the court was already familiar with him. This was not Larson's first appearance, and the judge had previously ordered him to stay away from the woman.
I know, but it's like this fatal attraction kind of stuff that I warned you about last time. I told you to just leave her alone. She was a classmate of yours. She apparently has no interest in seeing
I want her to tell me to leave her alone.
But Larson didn't see it that way. In his mind, this wasn't stalking. It was some kind of twisted romance. In court, he doubled down. He spoke over the judge, grew argumentative, and then, astonishingly, he turned his accusations toward the bench itself. The more Larson spoke, the thinner the judge's patience wore. Judge John McBain had heard enough. Initially, he sentenced Larson to 3 days in jail.
You know what? I told you to leave her alone. And apparently that didn't get through loud and clear. So today, you're going to jail for 3 days. And the next time you violate it, you're going to jail for...
You and her are
You know what? You got a bad attitude.
But Larson wouldn't stop talking, wouldn't stop provoking. And with each outburst, the sentence grew longer. First days, then weeks, until Larson's defiance had pushed the punishment into months.
You and her are buddy-buddy. Y'all get along. Y'all are...
45 days county jail. 93 days in the county jail. You want to go for a year? Try it right now. One more word out of you, it'll be a year of county. You're going to jail for a year in the county. 365 days county jail. Can't do it.
But things didn't stop there. When the judge ordered the court officer to cuff him, Larson resisted.
Put your hands behind your back. Tase his ass right now.
What should have been a simple handcuffing spiraled into chaos, with the tension exploding into a full-blown struggle right in the middle of the courtroom. And then came the moment that stunned everyone watching.
That's enough for you, all right? I will make it 93 if you can think about it, all right? Poor people, you know her. Well, so I know her. That's not fair.
Judge McBain ripped off his robe, stepped down from the bench, and personally joined in the fight to restrain Larson. It was a scene almost unheard of.
That's enough for you, all right? We'll make it 93. You can think about it, all right? Go to Facebook. You know her. Well, so I know her. That's not fair.
Larson was eventually wrestled to the ground, cuffed, and hauled out of the courtroom. This time, his antics earned him more than just a 3-day stint. He was sentenced to nearly 3 months in jail, a punishment that matched not only his charges, but the chaos he brought to the courtroom itself. Larson went on and on until the judge decided to step in. But how does that compare to this other case where a defendant was out of control until the judge stepped in again to take matters into his own hands? This is Sidney Newsome, a Mississippi man brought before Pike County Justice Court on domestic violence charges. On the bench that day was Southern District Judge Aubrey Rimes. At first, everything appeared routine. The courtroom was calm, the proceedings orderly, and it seemed like just another day in Pike County. But the calm didn't last. When Newsome was asked to sign a few standard documents, he hesitated, then flat out refused. What should have been a simple formality quickly spiraled into a heated argument. Deputies moved in, ready to escort him out of the courtroom. That's when Sidney lost control completely.
First, he grabs a stack of papers from the desk.
First, he snatched up a stack of papers from the judge's desk and hurled them across the courtroom, scattering sheets in the air as they smacked against the bench. And then, he grabbed a desk telephone and threw it directly at Judge Rimes. By now, the courtroom was in chaos. But instead of retreating, Judge Rimes decided he had seen enough. In a stunning moment rarely witnessed inside a courtroom, the judge stood up from behind the bench, grabbed Newsome himself and slammed him against the desk, holding him there until deputies rushed in to take control. Within seconds, deputies had Newsome restrained and dragged out of the room, leaving behind a courtroom and a judge who had just been forced to step out of the role of referee and into the role of enforcer. Newsome's meltdown in the courtroom was chaotic, but what happens when a teen murder suspect flashes a gesture and ends up nearly losing his life in the hands of the victim's family? This is Victor Rivas, just 17 years old, standing before a judge in San Antonio, Texas, charged with first-degree murder. The story begins in May of 2022 when police responded to a shooting in Bexar County. At the front door of a home, they discovered 15-year-old Ethan Soto, riddled with bullets, left bleeding out only steps away from safety. Despite desperate efforts, Ethan did not survive. Investigators quickly pieced together what happened. This wasn't random violence. It was personal. The killing was tied to drug-related feuds among teenagers, disputes that escalated from whispers in the streets to outright execution. Witnesses and evidence pointed to one name, Victor Rivas. He was arrested, charged with murder, and held in custody awaiting trial. When Rivas appeared for a pre-trial hearing, the air in the courtroom was already tense. In the gallery sat Ethan's grieving family, and their eyes were locked on the teenager who was accused of ending their son's life. The room felt like a powder keg, waiting for a spark. And that spark came in the form of a single gesture. Because right in the middle of the proceedings, Rivas raised his hand and made a gesture to the family of his victim, who were still sitting in the courtroom. Some swore he flashed a gang sign. Others believed it was nothing more than a dismissive wave toward the family. Whatever his intent, the effect was immediate. The gallery exploded.
First at 5, family members of a murdered teenager accused of attacking the man on trial for it right in the middle of a Bexar County courtroom.
Ethan's loved ones surged forward, shouting, hurling insults, and then straight up started to attack the defendant. The court deputies rushed to contain the chaos, but the anger spread through the room in seconds. Rivas, barely protected by the rail and officers around him, was swept into the melee. Finally, Victor Rivas was pulled out of the frenzy, but not before the young defendant suffered visible injuries before deputies managed to put him away from the courtroom. When order was finally restored, Rivas wasn't escorted out as a form of punishment, but for his own safety. Fast forward to April 2025. After years of hearings and delays, the trial came to its close. The jury found Rivas guilty. He was sentenced to 40 years in prison for the murder of Ethan Soto, with another 10 years added for evading arrest in a vehicle. Victor Rivas was beaten up by the victim's family for making a rude gesture. But how does that compare to a defendant who went straight for the judge? This is Melissa Hardwick, a woman brought before the Russell and Wayne County Family Court in Kentucky for a domestic violence hearing filed by her ex-husband. At first, everything seemed routine. The courtroom was quiet. The judge listened carefully, and Melissa's ex calmly explained what had driven him to seek a protective order. But what started as a standard hearing quickly spiraled into chaos when Melissa suddenly erupted in the middle of his testimony.
My personal life is none of your business.
The judge immediately cut in, warning her that if she didn't calm herself, she'd be held in contempt of court. But instead of backing down, Melissa pushed back even harder, raising her voice and disrupting the hearing.
Nothing to do with
Miss Hardwick,
no.
You will be held in contempt of this court if you become disruptive.
The judge wasted no more time. She was held in contempt and ordered to serve 10 days in jail. But the drama inside that courtroom was only just beginning.
I haven't done anything to this court. I haven't done anything to him.
She will be arrested for contempt of court.
It doesn't make any difference.
You will serve 10 days for contempt of court.
As deputies moved toward her, Melissa snapped. In a split-second outburst, she lunged directly at the judge.
Go now.
The entire courtroom froze as deputies scrambled to restrain her. Struggling against officers, Melissa was dragged from the room, but the consequences of that attack didn't end at the courtroom door.
Get off of me!
Hands behind your back. Hands behind your back.
She was slapped with brand new criminal charges, including threats and physical disruption in a court of law. Her actions were so severe that a new judge had to be appointed to continue the case. In the end, Melissa Hardwick received a sentence of 120 days in jail, proof that her explosive defiance only made her punishment worse. Melissa lunged at a judge, but what happened in this courtroom in Houston made her look almost tame, because this defendant's hearing spiraled into one of the wildest courtroom riots deputies had ever seen. This is Frank DeLeon Jr., a 19-year-old man standing trial for the cold-blooded murder of 16-year-old Diamond Alvarez. On January 11th, 2022, in Houston, Texas, Diamond left her house to take her dog on a walk, a normal evening routine that should have ended with her safe return home. But Frank was waiting. He had recently been caught cheating, and Diamond had ended their relationship. Authorities later revealed that Frank ambushed her, pulling out a gun and firing 22 shots. Diamond collapsed on the sidewalk just steps from her home. When police arrived, they found her lifeless body, her dog still at her side. Within days, Frank was identified, arrested, and charged with her murder. But as tragic as the killing was, the courtroom scenes that followed became unforgettable. As sentencing approached, the atmosphere inside the courtroom grew unbearably tense. Family members filled the benches, emotions ran high, and then Diamond's mother stepped up to deliver her victim impact statement.
Before, as you mentioned, this pure chaos lasted several minutes, and it all happened shortly after the victim's mother gave her impact statement where she called Frank DeLeon Jr. a monster.
But grief overwhelmed her. She stepped down from the stand and made a sudden move toward Frank.
Cameras were rolling as Diamond Alvarez.
Deputies quickly intercepted her, but no one anticipated what would happen next. Diamond's uncle rushed forward, lunging for Frank himself.
As his mother began walking towards DeLeon, a bailiff holds her back. That's when the situation escalates.
Chaos exploded. Deputies tried to drag Frank away, but in that same instant, Frank's mother leapt into the melee, charging at Diamond's mother. Both women tore into each other while shouting filled the courtroom. A cousin of Diamond's then jumped in, and within seconds, the hearing had erupted into a full-scale brawl. Family members clashing in front of the judge, while deputies fought to pull them apart. Order completely collapsed. The judge had no choice but to postpone the hearing until calm could be restored. Outside, after the brawl, Diamond's mother gave a statement to the reporters.
That was wrong of me. That was wrong of us because we're not monsters. But it's so much hate because I want my daughter back.
Eventually, the case moved forward. Frank accepted a plea deal, sparing himself a full trial but ensuring decades behind bars. He was sentenced to 45 years in prison. Frank's case ended in fists flying. But what happens when a family, unable to contain their rage, attack the killers of their 9-year-old child? This is Andre Fisher, and beside him stands his nephew, Derek Cummings. Both men are in court, awaiting sentencing for the cold-blooded murder of 9-year-old Shelton Lucas Jr. The crime dates back to February 15, 1994. In the early morning hours, bullets tore through a home on Washington Estates Drive. 35 rounds riddled the walls as young Shelton and his mother slept on the couch. One bullet struck Shelton in the head. He was rushed to the hospital, but the wound was fatal. The boy never woke up. Now, years later, the Lucas family stood face to face with the killers. The courtroom was thick with grief and tension as victim impact statements began. Shelton's grandmother held up a framed photograph of her grandson, her voice breaking as she spoke about the life stolen and the hole left in the family.
See where they put him, what it did to him.
What happens next is unbelievable.
And in that instant, Shelton's father could no longer hold back his rage. He lunged across the room, straight at the killers. Deputies reacted instantly, but they weren't the only ones. Other enraged relatives surged forward, joining the fight. The courtroom dissolved into chaos. The judge shouted over the fray and ultimately cleared the entire room, postponing sentencing. But that explosion of emotion came at a steep price. Shelton's father, Lucas Sr., was held in contempt, along with 2 other family members, Carlin and Charles Johnson. The judge sentenced Lucas Sr. to 30 days in jail, while the Johnson brothers received 15 days each. Once order was restored, the court reconvened. Andre Fisher and Derek Cummings, the men responsible for the boy's death, were sentenced to life in prison, while the memory of that father's outburst remained burned into the history of the case.